were just chatting earlier about this concept of how much stress is in our environment right now as a result of things that are going on in the world. We've got international conflict. We have our own domestic conflict with things coming up in November. And then we've got hurricanes happening, people just really suffering. So I'm wondering what that is like for the two of you as you are encountering your clients. Have you noticed that their stress levels are rising? Have you noticed anything different?
A good question, Catherine. You can go.
I do know I have a client who got really scared with a few of the school shootings that started to happen.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so I know that's been a hot spot for a little bit
Right.
in our nation these days. And there's stats that showed some of those rates going up, but I think kids are more scared than ever with those kind of things these days.
Do you think that kids are they talking about it, or are they just bearing those feelings? I mean, in general, obviously when they come into therapy, they're there to chat about things. But do you think in general kids are talking about these things, or is it just getting buried?
I'm trying to reflect. I have noticed the topic of politics come up freely with clients. Of course, as a clinician, I'd never bring that like a topic of any type of election or voting up. But I've noticed some of my clients have ideas and they're influenced by people they consider leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it's not talked about a lot, because even though I'm open and I'm willing to be kind of a blank slate for them to explore their feelings as it relates to what's going on, they're like, yeah, but it doesn't bother me much. And in therapy, sometimes we look at those responses as like interesting, because there might be more there, but they just might not be willing to talk about it, or there might not be more there. And so I always try to see how if anybody feels like it impacts their lives daily, and I've had people share their concerns about people dying and members of their family dying, and placing maybe some undue blame on one person or another.
Right.
And so there's these real emotions that come up when it comes to these discussions. And I think as a culture, kind of in general, I was born and raised in Texas. I'm tried and true Texan. And we love football, and we love Friday, and we love high school football. And I think as a people try not to let things divide us necessarily. So we don't like to talk about things that bring division.
Right.
So, just kind of personally coming from my own family, we didn't talk about it much growing up, but when it became kind of more vivid on our social media and our TV and in our living rooms, we were kind of forced to talk about it.
You're at least thinking about it.
We're thinking about it.
Right. So even if those dialogues aren't happening, there's still internal thought process going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You said something interesting, and we've talked a little bit about this before, but you mentioned that idea of being a blank slate with clients, right? And so as therapists, right, I think our goal has nothing to do with trying to change people's stances or parties or anything like that, right?
Or
like
any judgment about
right.
But our goal is to try to help people to be able to process, right, from the mental health side, from the emotional side of how to cope with all these kind of things at the national level, right? And but you mentioned the idea of being a blank slate, and I'm not sure I totally agree with that, because while we're not pushing stances in the therapy room, we do have to try to connect with where people are, and I think, and maybe this is just a little bit semantic, but the idea of a blank slate makes me think of like the whole old psychoanalytical approach where you're not really bringing much warmth into
Mm.
the meeting with the client.
Okay.
And so while we're not like taking stances, I think like we do want to make sure we're providing warmth and validation with the emotions and the
Right.
experiences our clients
Yeah.
are having.
Right.
But that was just kind of my thought when you mentioned the blank slate idea
I
there.
love what you brought out of that, George, and I love having these conversations because we're able to disagree
Mhm.
and talk through it and hear one another's perspective. And I think so often
Yeah.
when we bring hot topics up, we don't want to hear other people's
Right.
perspective.
Right.
We want to just say our way and shut others out because it brings up so many emotions.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate that we're all able to sit and have this conversation, and I was able to hear what you said. When I say the idea of a blank slate, maybe I'm using it wrong because I want to bring warmth to my clients
Mhm.
and understanding
Mhm.
and see how and curiosity about
Yes.
how something that they bring up in session
Absolutely.
is impacting them,
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rather than judgment.
Rather than
And I
right.
think that's where you're coming from with the concept
Yes.
of blank slate
Yeah.
is I am
Yeah.
not here. I do not have an agenda
Yeah,
that I am pushing one way or the other.
absolutely.
If there is an agenda in therapy, it is to help the client minimize, reduce, maybe even extinguish the distress that they're feeling.
Mhm.
That's the
Right.
agenda.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where for some clients that takes them on a journey over here, and for others they're going in a completely different direction. And the beauty of therapy is that a skilled therapist can move with them.
Right.
We don't have to just sit in one space and say, well, you've got to do it my way. The client is really in charge, and we are just there to help guide them through the journey, to keep them safe through that journey so that they don't feel an overwhelming amount of distress, which could trigger some adverse reaction in them. We're going to just keep everything in a protective, safe environment for them. And part of that is us not judging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that this came up because of that. When you were talking about that, Catherine, it made me think of bringing, our agenda as therapists being to lower the distress of our clients, to increase happiness and joy, or increase the quality of relationships that they have in their life. Like typically that is something all my clients want more of.
Right.
That across the board feels like something everybody wants.
Right.
That I see.
Right.
And so it's really about being present enough to help them bring mindfulness to the activities they're engaging in outside of the room. So talking about our body tension, talking about holding tension in our bodies, talking about our heart rate, bringing awareness to our behaviors.
Yeah.
And if those behaviors really align with the values we want to bring more of into the world. And, sometimes we act in ways because we're doing the best we can and we're surviving. And we don't realize that actually that's not the way we want to behave in the world.
Right.
And so a lot of people come to therapy to help them navigate those nuances. Or why do I keep doing this? Like let me look at that a little more.
Noticed a pattern.
Yeah. And so and I think somebody's interest in things at the world or national level is a part of them.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot in internal family systems. That is a part of them. And we want to know what that part is telling us, what that part needs, how that part can be validated and heard and understood.
What that part is afraid of.
Yes.
Right. So going back to these fears, we're talking about the increased stress that I think we're all noticing. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely noticing in my own life the what if, that anticipation of what could go wrong in the next few months in our world. And one of the things that I focus on so much with my clients is figuring out what they can have control over, and really trying to empower them to recognize the amount of control that they have in their life. And sometimes, I would say quite often, they don't even realize the things that they're not taking advantage of, that they actually have control over in terms of relationships. That even when somebody disagrees with you, and maybe you can't go to family dinner anymore because there's such dissension there's such contention in the family, how can you continue to love that person even from a distance? How can you continue to be in relationship with them, maybe in a different way? Maybe it looks different. And even the whole idea about drawing boundaries and saying, well, this isn't okay. And so now our family looks a little different. How do I move into acceptance about that? That maybe it doesn't fix the situation. So these are all things that I'm noticing as a result of the increased stress.
I think it can be really empowering to focus on like the things that you can control, right? Like okay, maybe at a huge national like political level, you can't control like who gets into the offices and who's in power and all that, but you can control that you go out and put your vote. You can control that you try to be helpful and supportive to your local community, right? You can control that you take care of your family, right? And instill the values that you believe into them, right? And so I think there's a lot of empowering things that we can control, maybe but instead we might get hung up or focused on all the stuff that's out of our control that isn't going well or going the way that we would have expected them to, right? But there's so much that we can focus on, right?
Absolutely.
That is very empowering and encouraging.
Well, there was, I think I saw a bumper sticker a few years ago, and I know we've heard the phrase, be the change. And I love that concept because it is about looking inward and saying, okay, I want these changes to happen in my world, right? I think every single one of us desires a more peaceful world, a much more collaborative world. So if I want that change, how do I enact that in my life? How do I be that in my world? So if I'm looking for peace and collaboration, how can I be more peaceful? How can I be more collaborative with the circle that is around me, rather than looking at it from the approach of everyone else needs to fix themselves or the world needs to fix itself? I'm going to first focus on me.
And I think that sphere of influence is really important, right? Because even like before the time when news was so like broadcast and we're connected to all this information, right? You just focused on your sphere of influence, right? You didn't. None of us are designed to have a global sphere of influence, right? And so, so I think that is the more natural way to look at it.
While you guys were talking, I really appreciate everything you said about being the change, about how do we, get our. I so often after national disasters, I'm noticing how it doesn't matter what you really believe in, but we're coming together, and we're in an area of Texas where we experience.
We unify.
We unify. And
it's beautiful to see.
It is really beautiful to see. It's like the calm after the storm. And I think it's really something we could learn from in living in our everyday life. People are out of their house more. We don't have electricity, so we're talking more. We're not behind a screen. Our Wi-Fi's down. Like, there's all these things we could maybe learn from those moments. We are out getting food together. We are gathering at somebody's house because they're the person that has electricity.
Right.
And for that moment, the national and the world sphere doesn't necessarily matter, because
the focus shifts.
The focus really shifts on our basic needs and our survival.
And that's where relationship is at, right? There's no relationship at a global breaking news level or something like that.
It's
right?
so true. So
Right.
true.
I think in social work we talk about the different levels, right? We talk about the individual, the meso, the macro, and how things going on at each of those levels can affect all the other levels.
Right.
That's a good point.
So in therapy, we're really working on an individual level. And these individuals are influenced by the meso and the macro. And we're all influenced by what's going on in our culture. And so
Right.
I think it's important that we at least help our clients who bring the topics up be okay with talking about it with us.
Yes.
Because I have noticed just in this moment kind of talking like the hesitancy, because when Catherine, you spoke about like maybe family dinners not being able to continue due to divisiveness, you know, how then you have a break in relationship, and the therapeutic relationship is something really important and really valuable to a client's healing, and to a client's success. And so they could have fear about bringing this up and what it will mean for our relationship moving forward. Because in the past, it's led to such divisiveness in their world.
Well, and as a nation, that's like what's modeled.
Right. So the history is, well, if I bring up this topic to my family, to the people who are supposed to be the safest with me, to my friends, then it has created contention. So why would I go bring it up to a therapist who I really like and they help me through these other problems, but I don't want to say something that might offend the therapist? I think that's a really valid concern. But what you're saying is, have no fear. You will not upset me. No. You will not offend me. It's a safe space. They get to come in and they get to share absolutely whatever. There isn't a whole lot that shocks us, I think.
I tell that to my clients all the time.
Yeah, we've heard it. We've heard it. So it's like, all right, that's what's going on with you. Really, our goal, as I stated before, is to reduce distress and create empowerment, as you were saying, George.
I never really thought about how how some of these like national level topics, right, can relate to like a fear of abandonment or people pleasing, right? So that's a very kind of interesting thought or idea that you all just brought up.
Yeah.
Well, and you put it into even like more, you know, real words that I think a lot of us can understand and identify with.
Right.
And the fear of not being your authentic self.
Right.
For fear of hurting somebody's feelings.
You can only show parts of yourself.
You can only show parts of yourself. Or for fear of offending, or for fear of, and so how much do we, you know, stay hidden and unauthentic?
Right.
Which ends up being a distress to ourselves.
Absolutely.
When we can't just explore these nuanced aspects of our humanity.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I suppose a lot of social anxiety can come up for people too, specifically during this time of like, just like this whole like, how do I talk? What do I say? What do I not say? Like, you know, like, I think we can all relate to that.
I'll just keep to myself. I won't talk to anybody.
Yeah. Until after November, I'm just doing me.
But it doesn't, it's not effective. We need to be able to, you know, one of the most natural things, the most necessary things of being a human being is to be known. And when you feel unknown, it really contributes to a sense of loneliness. I was up in Austin over the past few days, and I don't know the area very well. And I only know people in our office. And so the couple of days that I was there that I wasn't going into the office, I recognized the loneliness that set in to go to the store and not be recognized, and to not even have a remote chance of being recognized, you know, because I don't know anybody. But that is just such a common thing inside every human being, is this desire to be known. And so it makes me wonder what is happening with that if we are having to really filter and we're having to really put away our authenticity because we are afraid of the rejection. We're afraid of the abandonment. And what does that do? Do we really feel known? And is that possibly contributing to a sense of loneliness or a sense of depression at a deeper level?
We've referenced ideas that make me think of Brene Brown quite a bit. And Brene Brown often...
Texan too.
Yeah.
Yes. You got a little bias there, Lindsay.
I might be a bias about Brene Brown. Social worker. Sorry. But she references the power of being vulnerable and the power of showing up as you are. And she also references the importance of these nuanced conversations.
Right.
When it's not all or nothing thinking. And I think she talks about putting on your boots and mucking through the swamps.
Yeah.
Such a Texan example.
I can't help it. That's what it is. So, again, that's something that unites us, right? So I think, and then the other thing I've been thinking of, listening to you guys talk about being seen and kind of our go-tos when we're not seen is that fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And some people are using the word fawn now too. Fawn is people pleasing. Fighting is I'm going to argue until the bitter end.
Right.
Fleeing is I just will not show up. I will just not talk to anybody.
Right.
And then freezing is just getting quiet in all these moments.
Right.
Right. And while that might be a protective measure for us and very necessary if your safety is a concern, right? It also doesn't help you process things in a healthy way.
Right. Right. Yeah. Hiding away is effective in a moment of crisis.
Yeah.
It is, however, not an effective way to live. So the idea of, therapy can really be empowering to give people, first of all, help them discover their identity of what do I believe? How do I feel about these things? Kind of a safe trial zone to bounce those ideas around. And then once they feel confident and they know who they are, then helping them build that resilience and that courage to be able to move out into the world and share that authentically. And not in a way that you have to be up on a stage, announcing your beliefs or your values, but just in the way that you live.
For some of my clients, that might be where they end up. On a stage,
right?
Announcing it. I don't know, right?
It's true,
but that's not the only way.
It's true
that we can live.
Yeah.